Looking at this differential cover on this F250, we can see the leak has happened because of an excessive amount of rust on this cover. Today we're going to remove this cover and replace it with a new Dorman part. Before we get started, there is something I want you to know. These two tags are really important. One tells us all about the differential, and the other tells us exactly what fluid we've got to put back in. So be sure and keep track of these because we're going to reinstall them with that new cover. Everything on this cover is rusty, including the mounting bolts. So be sure you get the right size socket before you start so you don't strip anything out. We don't have a problem using power tools to take things off, and that just is going to help us make this job go a little bit faster. But remember, this tag's important, so put it someplace safe. Now that we've got all these bolts out, you can see that that cover is really on there tight. We're going to have to work to get that off. I left two bolts in the top so we can pry the bottom out and let the fluid drain out. I wouldn't be this rough on a cover that we're going to reuse, but since we're replacing this one, we can go ahead and use a hammer and knock that out of the way. Let that fluid drain out, and that's why we left those top two bolts in right there. I'm going to stick this screwdriver in just so it'll keep draining, and then I'm going to go around and I'm going to check some other things. That cover will stay on there and I can take those two bolts out, but let's look at the brake lines and everything else just to see if they're rusted as bad as everything else under this truck. With the cover out of the way, it's time to clean up that housing. We're going to use a right angle die grinder and we're going to go around and get that sealer off. Take your time and be sure not to let any debris get inside that housing. Ford uses RTV instead of a gasket, and we're using this Permatex gasket maker. We're using the Dorman piece, and we're only going to put about an 1/8 inch thick sealer on this. Any more and it just squeezes out and then into the differential. We're going to wipe that housing down one last time, and we're going to get it ready to put the cover on. We're going to take care as we're doing this, and I've got a bolt in the top. The arrows are going to show you how I hold this out, and I don't let the cover touch the housing. I don't want to make a big mess. So I'm going to start that top bolt, then I'm going to put another bolt in, and then finally I'll let that cover touch the housing. I prefer to run these all down by hand first, and notice that I left the two out that are going to hold our two tags on. Once I get that done, I'm going to make sure those tags go back on and run those down by hand also. This is when we can take our 1/4 inch drive and we can go around and set that down. But our final time that we tighten, we're going to use a special pattern and a torque wrench.